Hey everybody, my name is Gatsby, and I'm making this game where you're trapped in a computer. Deciding what the world is supposed to look like has been giving me a headache. I wind up in this recursive thought loop of should it look more techie or should it look more natural? Now, you may immediately think, well, it's a computer, it should look more techie. But when I say trapped in a computer, I don't mean you're literally trapped in the tower or in the hard drive or in the motherboard. I mean you now exist in the same way programs or files do on the computer. You've been turned into data. So really anything you smell, see, hear, or feel is just a metaphor of what you're experiencing. It's the reality you have. And I'm sure your brain is just trying to present that in a way that's familiar to you, which makes me ask the question, why wouldn't it look more like a world that's familiar to you? When I think of digital worlds, there are two that immediately come to mind for me. Tron and Digimon. Tron really leans hard into the digital world being sci-fi, futuristic, breathing technology. Digital jazz, man. But ultimately, everything you're seeing here is a metaphor. When you watch pieces of the technology, the equipment, the armor click together, it's not actually doing that. These things don't physically exist. The weapons don't have moving parts. They all just represent code, script. So really, none of it has to look this way at all. Then you look at Digimon, which leans in the other direction. Not all the way, but there's water, there's trees, there's grass. But you're still occasionally going to see really weird, surreal things from time to time that remind you, oh, I'm not in the real world, I'm in a digital one. So I guess my recent headache is deciding what my health and armor power-ups should look like. First, I had to decide what these things are, so that it would make any sense that whenever you picked something up, it increased those values. In an ordinary first-person shooter, your health pickups are generally going to be items that heal the body. So first aid kits, magic potions, even something as simple as blood to replace blood that you've lost. But a lot of my game's aesthetic is meant to evoke the childlike wonder of navigating a computer and imagining from that perspective what being in it would be like. So not a Tron perspective, more or less the perspective of stepping directly through the screen and peeking around at a world you're already familiar with, but in greater detail. So I asked myself, what are some things that you already see in abundance when you're using a computer? The answer to that is typically things like file icons and desktop icons. And I tried to think of which file icons make the most sense to represent health. And immediately the knee-jerk reaction is to say, oh, we'll just use like a medkit icon or a heart, but you don't ever really see those things when you're using a computer normally. Those icons exist on a computer, but you're not seeing them frequently. The kinds of icons you're seeing frequently are normally different types of files, like text documents, and MP3s, and videos, and images, especially images. But I still wanted it to make sense, so I kind of imagined, what if consuming the things that a child already enjoys collecting on a computer is going to heal you? I remembered MS Paint and all the different little drawings I did and saved, and so I figured, alright, well maybe picking up little image files, and sound files, and music files, and videos heals you. And that leaves me to use the more boring things like text files, config files as armor. But without realizing it, I've also introduced this little thematic element of truth. See, the first and only health power-up I've implemented so far is this apple with 2 bites taken out of it. This is actually a reference to a book I tried to write when I first started teaching, and I hope I still get a chance to write it one day, but I haven't worked on it in a long time. Anyway, when you pick it up, the first thing the apple does is hurt you really bad. It brings you down to 1 health for about 3 seconds. After that time passes, it heals you all the way back up to full. It displays 2 messages when this happens. It always hurts at first, and it always sets you free. I've been really bothered lately with how much people seem to have abandoned all hope or trust in the truth. But the truth was always this sort of fickle mistress. You can't just ask for the truth. You have to hunt for it and fight for it. And by the time you get it, a lot of times you wish you hadn't, because the truth hurts. But at the end of the day, it's what you needed. You can't function without it, not in a way that doesn't hurt somebody, even if that person isn't you. So I thought, okay, well maybe my health and armor power-ups are going to be 2 different facets of the truth. I played around with a bunch of different terms and arrived at verity and parity. I may adjust this, so don't hold me too closely to it, but for right now, verity sort of represents personal truth. And I don't necessarily mean subjective opinion, I mean more or less verity represents the value we place on our own personal experiences. That's why that one's represented by artistic things like images and music and video. Parity, however, represents confirming that truth through external sources. So, empirical evidence. The point of which being to clearly indicate that while you can be happy in your personal truth, you also can't reside in that echo chamber permanently without hurting someone. You gotta be willing to check your facts. And if you discover you're wrong about something, you've got to be willing to learn and change. So in a way, research, information, and evidence protect our inner selves from harm, which is all well and good, but I still have a problem. And that's that most desktop icons are flat. And I know 2D sprites are flat. That's not what I mean. What I mean is most of the motifs used for Windows operating systems are office supplies. Things that are already, for the most part, flat. Things like paper and folders. Hell, even floppy disks and CD-ROMs are mostly flat. I didn't like that because a lot of what is satisfying about my game's aesthetic right now is seeing these things realized in a sort of unexpected 3D perspective. Like, yeah, my enemies are still billboarded 2D sprites, but that's more or less out of homage to Doom than anything else. And also, I don't want to make them 3D. It sounds hard. To get out of my echo chamber, I've been playing a lot of games that I've never played before to see how different developers handle both general first-person mechanics and also tributes to classic gaming. I finally got around to playing a little bit of Warhammer 40k Bolt Gun, a game that's very clearly meant to be a love letter to classic Doom. But I didn't realize until I played it that it also achieves a lot of the classic visual aesthetic in ways I have already been hoping to do, but it does that in ways I hadn't yet considered. Bolt Gun's already using a sort of color lookup table or some other system to restrict the palette of colors on screen. And that creates this sort of color banding that, while it's technically an artifact of limited technology, they're doing it on purpose to evoke the feeling of playing on limited technology. Likewise, a lot of elements within the game are just 2D sprites billboarded to face the camera. But they've clearly made the decision to render certain things in 3D purely because it looks awesome. Take your weapons, for example. I've been looking at this really closely, and I can't make up my mind whether or not these are 3D or 2D. Like, at some point, they were rendered in 3D and captured, and then possibly turned into 2D sprites for the actual gameplay, like in Donkey Kong. But I could be wrong. This could just be the shader converting it into something that resembles pixel art in a way that I'm already trying to do with my game's limited scaling and the lookup table. But if that's what's happening, they're already doing it in a way that's better than how I know how to do it. Then there's the pickup objects themselves, which are very clearly fully realized 3D meshes, but are textured with such attention to detail that they almost look like they're voxel sculptures. And I don't really think that's what they are, because you can see all the anti-aliasing pixels there as well. I feel like if you were creating a voxel sculpture, you wouldn't be adding individual voxels of anti-aliasing pixels. Why would you do that when you could just rely on the existing light and shadow from your game's more modern engine? I still haven't made up my mind. I think that this may just be something akin to texture mapping, giving a little bit more depth than what was done by hand. But I don't know. I am proud of the eye that I have for these things, but I'm still not entirely sure here. Anyway, after brainstorming for a long time, I'm still at a little bit of a loss for what to use for my pickup items. Don't get me wrong, I charted out this entire list of things that I feel like make good sense, but they're still not very 3D. The best that I've managed to create is sort of mostly flat assets, like pieces of folders that I've positioned in such a way that clearly occupy 3D space, like they're open, right? And they have a little bit of thickness to them. And then I've positioned these mostly 2D like documents as separate objects within the greater fab so that I can have them bob at different speeds. And so you understand, oh, this is not just a big pre-rendered sprite. This is a bunch of individual objects with their own tangible physics interplaying with one another in the greater fab. And yeah, I think that's cool, but if we're having a pissing contest, Bolt Gun has me hosed. But I'm trying to remind myself that the point isn't to be as cool or cooler than Bolt Gun. I'm only even making this game as a portfolio project because I'm struggling to find work doing anything. I have a lot of skills in a lot of really different fields, but nothing seems to be working. So getting hung up on trying to make sure my little health pickups meet my own personal standard of jealousy for a single little classic Doom tribute game created as a spin-off of one of the world's most popular tabletop gaming franchises, yeah, that's not a valuable use of my time. Instead, I'm trying to appreciate the fact that this just looks so neat. Anyway, thanks for watching. I don't say this enough, and I really should, but please like, comment, and subscribe. I hate that phrase, but not more than I hate being unemployed, so everything that I can do to make sure my video gets some reach is something that I need to swallow my pride and do. Now for a little housekeeping, I think my most popular video on this channel right now is the one about my job search and my ADHD, and eventually working on that black and white Game Boy inspired 2D 3D RPG holofoil. I'm still very proud of that concept, but it was turning out to be way too complex for a baby's first Unity project. So the game you're looking at now is The Compromise. It's a first-person platformer with shooter elements that is really just a way for me to have a creative outlet and to also work on portfolio stuff for finding work. And you know, because it's a first-person platformer instead of a literal JRPG, I'm already a lot less overwhelmed by it, which is great at such a stressful time in my life. Right now, my primary source of stress with this game is the fact that it has gotten some attention. Don't get me wrong, I would love to finish this game and sell this game and become known for this game and make money making games, because I am trying to make money at all so that I can continue to eat food. But, I don't know, it was a little bit like not realizing until the day of that it's picture day and I have an enormous zit. I know I'm mommy's handsome boy. I understand this. It's just I would really prefer to be presenting the best version of myself whenever something happens that can possibly help my future. And you know, the article talked a lot about my game, but it had like mixed examples of new footage and old screenshots, and they linked to a demo that I hadn't updated in over a month, so I had to go back and fix that. I don't know. I think it gave me a mild panic that was not something I should... It didn't help me to panic at all. And I have also been in situations like this enough times to know that scrambling to try to capitalize on this wasn't exactly going to do me any good if I didn't come up with any real idea of how to do so. So it was cool that it got featured, but I didn't have any actionable things that I could do right away to keep that momentum going because, as I mentioned, the game is just not really ready yet. Anyway, yeah, if you've got any questions or comments about this game or my other game or just anything going on in my life, you can go right ahead. I will answer those things to the best of my ability. Thankfully, I don't believe I mentioned any of the internet's current least favorite topics, so I don't believe I will have to field any hate mail today. And if you have any questions about any of those things, don't. Jesus Christ, it is a voxel sculpture.